Hello. Today I got a little dwarf Mugo pine that I'm going to be working on. Really just going to take off here. First branch I'm going to take off is this big branch here. The tree came up and just had a single junction of 3 large branches, so I selected the least desirable one and took that off. Keep one as the first branch, and the tallest one there is going to be the new leader. And go ahead and seal that cut right away, since I'm pretty confident that's going to be the only major cut on this tree. This is the time of year right after the first flush of growth, or for these Mugo pines, most likely the only flush of growth, has completely hardened off and started to pay the tree back for the energy it spent to make it. So now I can go through and just select any shoots that I don't want, shoots that are growing up, shoots that are in the crotches of branches that I've already chosen as the branches I'm going to keep. This tree was repotted in late winter from a small nursery container into this bonsai training container. It's in standard 111 mix, pumice, lava, akadama. It really put on a lot of growth this year. The tree is definitely healthy and strong. These dwarf Mugo pines they seem to be, at least where I am here in upstate New York, or in the Hudson Valley, very common nursery material. As you can see, this one had budded back all over the branches. They seem to be pretty easy to work with, pretty strong. Like I said, pretty easy to find. The growth is nice and compact. The needles on this tree are about as long as I see them on this variety, even for ones that I've had in the garden for a couple of years, or ones that I'm buying, if I bought it yesterday. I haven't yet really tried to reduce the needle size on any of the trees that I have, but I'm sure that they can be reduced to an even smaller size than this. This bit here is going to be the leader of the tree. So I'm doing this, just treating it the same as the rest of the branches, even though it's more upright. I'm going to go through and reduce any of the junctions down to 2 branches, of course including the trunk. As I said, there's a lot of little shoots to deal with on this tree. It just budded back everywhere. There's some 3rd-year needles there that I had to remove. Just removing some needles and shoots that fell into the pot. I'm going to put a few pieces of wire on here. I'm not really doing any final design work here. I'm just objectively trying to move branches into, some sort of place that makes sense for that branch. This is 3mm wire I'm putting on. Oh, I could be lying. That looks like 2. I'm just connecting 2 branches here on opposite sides of the trunk. Because the growth is so tight, it is pretty difficult to fish the wires in between without trapping needles or damaging young shoots. But it's definitely worth doing this work now while those branches are small and easy to move. Especially with a tree this small, I want to really be damaging or removing as few needles as possible. I'm carrying this first wire as far out onto the branch it takes to get to the next junction, and then carrying that piece of wire out onto one of the two branches on that next junction. That way, when I wire those two branches together, the first wire that I carried out provides a backbone and a place for the branch to have the ability to bend and the wire to hold at that junction. If you just connect two wires to two branches at a junction without having that other wire to create a backbone there, you will be able to move the branches in one plane, but you really won't have any control over them up and down. So with the first wire that I carried across, I moved the shoulders of both those primary branches just down, forward, or back where I needed them to be. This is a piece of 1.5 millimeter wire. I'm going to link it to one of these lower branches and then carry it up the new leader just so I can put a little bit of movement in that leader again now while it's small and flexible. Here I'm only plucking the needles that are actually in the way of where the wire needs to go. Like I said, I don't want to remove any more needles from this tree than I really have to. It is pretty challenging to fish the wire through in between all of these needles, but I think it's worth the effort. On a larger tree, I wouldn't even bother to wire a branch until I'm at the point that I'm going to be plucking the needles off of that branch anyway, and then can wire a branch without needles on it. It makes it a whole lot easier. But I intend to keep this tree quite small, so I want to get the structure set as early as possible so I don't need to have wire on the tree. Just cutting off excess wire. Now, like I said, I'm going to wire these two secondary branches together using the first wire as a backbone so that I can bend both of these branches in any direction that I want to. So I have a spectator for a few minutes. Again, I'm carefully weaving these wires in between the needles. I don't want to trap needles. Trap needles underneath the wire, a lot of times they'll break and they'll just die off. And even if they don't, they're just being either tucked together or tucked against a branch, and they're not really going to be doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. So it is better just to either remove that pair of needles or don't trap it in the first place. Now I'm just trying to move these branches into a position that makes some sense. Give each branch its own space, its own light, its own air. I say I'm not necessarily working on a final design, but just trying to objectively get rid of flaws and open the tree up to kind of let it do its own thing. Much easier in the future to move a branch a little bit than to have to move it a lot. So just positioning things in something that's, reasonable and makes sense. The two lower branches almost look like bar branches, but in reality they're not. That second branch, the branch to the right, is actually coming off of what is the trunk. It's just being kind of blurred by the wire. So, thanks for watching, and I'm sure I'll show you an update on this tree at some point.